Ladies and gents, this is the new installment of Bounce the Head. In this game, we'll see all contestants have been sent to the guillotine, and we'll see whose head bounces the far and whose head gets chopped off the quickest. The winner will be no one, since Napoleon is rising and he's going to take over soon, and French Revolution will be like, it didn't matter. So yeah, this is the French Revolution, OverSimplified Part 2 by the channel OverSimplified. I already did the Part 1, I guess, 2 days ago. So yeah, so far, what we've seen is nobility acting like nobility, like they don't care about the peasants, working class or whatever. And they basically, clergy and nobility basically are just, living lavishly while everybody suffer. There is some kind of a famine type of thing also happened there, and people still just, lavishly live. They hoard all the breads while people were starving. It was going to reach breaking point eventually. It was inevitable. And then there's some guy basically in bathtub, Marat, or whatever his name was, basically just started to write shit that basically rallied people. He's the example of social media at that time, apparently, somebody with a keyboard. But in his case, instead of keyboard, he had pen and paper. So yeah, let's watch this one. I'm pretty sure lots of heads are going to get chopped off because French Revolution is going to go out of control. As we all know, it's going to be one of the bloodiest thing ever. So let's watch it.
King Louis and his family were now in the Tuileries Palace in Paris, where for the next couple of years, he watched as the revolutionary government began to strip away his power. And fearing for his safety, he had to stay on their good side. Hey, look who it is. It's my favorite revolutionaries. Yep, I'm your #1 fan. What can I do for you? Hey, King Louis. So we've made a few decisions. First, all of your friends in the nobility are going to have to pay taxes the same as everyone else. Great idea.
Yep.
I love it. And as a side note, the tax money can no longer pay for all your lavish parties. Great. I hate those parties. They're so awkward. And also, we're taking away your Porsche. Oh, come on! I mean, yay. The king continually found demand after demand being made of him to prove his support for the revolution. On one occasion, a mob would invade the palace and demand he wear the revolutionary bonnet. This is the face of a man who is definitely pretending he wants to wear that bonnet. Now around here,
You are kidding me, that actually happened? I thought this was one of those oversimplified jokes. They actually made him wear that hat basically. That's just effed up, man.
I want to mention that one thing King Louis had a problem with was people constantly raiding his palace. But one thing he didn't have a problem with was raiding noobs on this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is a brand new collection RPG game with amazing 3D graphics, an awesome storyline, and giant boss fights, all free to play on your phone. There's over 400 champions for you to collect and customize, and crazy battles and events that will get you hooked immediately. You can find me in the game under the nickname OverSimplified, and if you're quick enough and cool enough, you can join my clan. Go to the video description, click on the special links, and you will instantly get 50,000 silver and a free epic champion as part of the new player program to start your journey. Good luck, and I'll see you there.
Yeah, this was in 2019, right? Around that time, Raid Shadow Legends were basically sponsoring every single big creator videos, like Internet Store and everybody. It became a meme type of thing.
Now where was I? Oh yeah. Seeing the situation rapidly turning against him, the king decided it might be a good idea to leave France and mount a campaign to retake his country from abroad. Luckily for him, he was married to an Austrian. So on the night of June 20th, 1791, the king and his family disguised themselves as servants and attempted to flee to the Austrian Netherlands. The royal carriage made a stop in the town of Varennes, and the postmaster there was like, "Hey guys, what's up? Where are you off to? We are but a collection of inconspicuous servants heading for the border for no particular reason at all." Say, you, the fat one, you look kind of familiar. Aren't you the king? Nope. Let me see your passport. It says here you're King Louis the 16th. Nope, not me. Take him away, boys. The king was promptly returned to Paris, but now the jig was up. His lack of support for the revolution was clear to all, and many considered him a...
Look, man, I'm just gonna say this. Alright, first of all, I get it. Around his time, his father and father before that and all the nobility were acting like they were acting, so I can't just blame this one king for all the, bad things that were happening at the time that the nobles were acting, how they were treating the peasants and poor people, right? But then again, it is kind of his fault because he was the king. He could have changed shit. And if he can't even run away from his country, I mean, come on, man. That's just effed up. I mean, how hard is it to, I guess, just run away from one place to another. This is not 21st century where there are technologies and basically satellites that can track you. You can't even get out of your country around this time.
A straight-up traitor who tried to abandon his people. As a result, the new Constitution of 1791 completely reduced his powers to that of a simple figurehead, a constitutional monarch. However, radicals, such as those in the Jacobin Club, were outraged that the king wasn't to be removed entirely. So a month later, these radicals staged a protest on the Champ de Mars, calling for the king's removal. The government of Paris feared an insurrection was mounting, and they sent the military to disperse the crowd. The confrontation escalated and resulted in the Revolutionary National Guard firing on a crowd of revolutionaries. It was a massacre. The incident exposed a deep division within the Brotherhood of the Revolution. On one side, the moderates who wanted to keep the king as a figurehead. On the other, radicals who wanted to see the king deposed and heads roll. In the wake of the massacre, these radicals received a wave of support.
Yeah, moderates were right, let's be honest. With the hindsight, moderates were right. Keeping him as a figurehead and taking chance from there and slowly moving forward would have been better for the revolution. Rather than completely removing him, having some strong ideas, right? Strong ideals and everything. Yeah, that just basically goes like the leader of that, revolution party will basically get power hungry and basically kill everybody who opposes them, send them to guillotine like it usually happens. And basically things will go out of hand so much that, one day Napoleon is just going to convince lots of powerful people that this is just bullshit, right? This is not good and we need someone more powerful at the helm and will become an emperor.
And speaking of rolling heads, one form of equality the revolution introduced was equality in execution. This meant no more torturous drawing and quartering, no more inhumane hanging. They wanted all criminals, regardless of economic status, to receive the same penalty, a quick and painless one. Luckily, a man by the name of Dr. Joseph Guillotine had an idea. A heavy blade that falls like thunder. The head flies off, blood spurts, and the man is no more. The guillotine, otherwise known as the National Razor. The guillotine made its debut in 1791 as the new...
A more humane way to kill people. But kill people nonetheless. It makes it easier. The point is, the people took this, this was probably made to make sure that whenever people die, they don't suffer or something. Which is probably not true because I'm pretty sure there is an instance where, people were, getting their head chopped off by guillotine and they were still alive. They were moving their eyes or something for a few minutes. So I don't know how painless this was, but that was the intent of this thing, right? Some people just saw that, easy, right? Smooth, which means I can cut more heads off, and there you go.
Form of execution. The writings of Marat and others continued to call for the execution of anyone suspected of working against the revolution. For him, this included some members of the clergy and nobility who had previously benefited from the cruel system of inequality that existed before the revolution. In many parts of the countryside, local lords had found themselves become a target. Sire, the peasants, they're revolting. Oh, come on, that's a bit harsh. Sure, they smell a bit, but I wouldn't say they're revolting. Oh yes, I see what you mean. Increasingly, these French aristocrats began fleeing France to find solitude in other parts of Europe. And once again, fear began to take hold. The privileged classes of these foreign nations didn't like what they were seeing because they feared revolutionary ideas may spread to their own lands. The National Assembly, actually now the Legislative Assembly, feared that these nations may decide to attack. Then why don't we attack them first? No, you idiots, we are definitely not ready for war yet. Did somebody say something? France declared war on Austria in April 1792 and immediately got pummeled. It also didn't help that Austria's ally, Prussia, joined.
See, there you go. You can already see the people in that basically room is getting power hungry already, right? They haven't even successfully done the revolution yet. There is no stability on the country yet. And they're like, okay, we are powerful enough, stable enough that we can do war now. This is just...
In the fighting, the Prussian Duke of Brunswick posted a letter warning the revolutionaries that if anything happened to the king, he would burn Paris to the ground. The Duke's letter proved to be a massive success in inspiring the people of Paris to do the exact opposite of what he intended. They were enraged by the threat, and on the 10th of August 1792, the tension in the city exploded, and a mob stormed the king's palace. Fighting broke out between the revolutionaries and the king's Swiss guard, with casualties in the hundreds. King Louis fled and took refuge in the chamber of the Legislative Assembly, where Robespierre and his radical Jacobins were gaining ever more power. Given the developing situation, the chamber decided to hold a vote, and in what some considered to be a second revolution, it was decided to suspend the monarchy entirely. King Louis XVI was now just plain old Louis, and he was sent to a prison cell where an eye could be kept on him. A month later, the newly established National Convention officially declared the French Republic, and society underwent a massive change. Enlightened ideas of democracy and equality were being implemented, but very quickly, these ideas seemed to become secondary to fear, paranoia, and a thirst for blood. The new republic began working to violently remove any semblance of the old royalist regime. The church became a prime target. Priests who refused to take an oath to the revolution were deported or arrested. A new state-sponsored atheistic religion named the Cult of Reason was created as a replacement for the Catholic Church. Notre Dame, along with many other churches, had their religious treasures destroyed and were converted to temples of reason. Even the Christian calendar didn't survive, as a brand new revolutionary calendar was soon introduced. Hey honey, I'm home. Yeah, whatever, jerk.
100 seconds per minute, 100 minutes per hour, 10 hours a day, an entirely new sets of months. Yeah, okay. Everything changes. Fuck it. Even seconds has to change.
Brand new revolutionary calendar was soon introduced. Hey honey, I'm home. Yeah, whatever, jerk. Whoa, what's wrong with you? You forgot. Forgot what? Everything. This entire year. My birthday was on the 3rd of Germinal, our anniversary was the 12th of Thermidor, and you promised that in Frimaire, we'd go on a romantic weekend trip to Venice. No, I said we'd do that in December. December hasn't been a thing for years. The government of Paris, now under the control of the radical sans-culottes, began rounding up suspected enemies of the revolution and sending them to prison in the thousands. Naturally, a large number of those arrested were members of the clergy and aristocracy. As France's foreign enemies continued to close in, panic spread. Georges Danton made impassioned calls for men to defend the Republic, and tens of thousands of troops left Paris for the front lines. However, in their absence, Paris was left to its own devices. As enemy troops arrived in Verdun, the people of Paris feared that their crowded prisons were becoming a breeding ground for counter-revolutionary conspiracy. What would happen if the Prussians reached Paris and freed the aristocrats? Marat believed he knew what would happen. The aristocrats would enact their vengeance on the people. Fearing those they had already imprisoned, mobs descended on...
I mean, kind of, yeah, right? If basically somebody come and rescues them and put them in power, yeah, they would do that.
Paris's prisons. They broke in, and during the brutal September massacres, aristocrats, priests, and others were tried and executed on the spot. Even women and children weren't spared. With over 1,600 victims, word of the massacre spread across Europe. One British newspaper wondered, are these the rights of man? Is this the liberty of human nature? But there was still one man in
Seriously,
particular.
that is the most effed up thing about it, right? French Revolution basically says that we are, removing the oppressor monarchs, right? We are creating some kind of a democracy in a way. But then the way they are doing things is so questionable that basically taints the picture, right? Like, this is what revolution looks like. This is what happens when monarchy is removed. This is what the democracy is. It kind of paints really grim picture for the world at the time. I mean, that was the most effed up thing about it. I mean, killing off people left and right, just because you think they could be going against you. Killing of children, sending people to guillotine left and right, which is going to happen soon, I guess. I mean, basically, this was the face of basically revolution. This became a thing after this. After French Revolution, for centuries, people just, thought of this when they thought about revolution. Like, overthrowing some kind of a tyrannical monarchy or something. Oh, okay, so what you going to do? You're going to do revolution, just like the French did? That was the most effed up part, man. People seeking freedom basically became that, that's an evil thing to do because what happened here?
That Robespierre and his radicals really wanted to see executed. Austria and Prussia pledged that after they defeated France, they'd return King Louis to the throne. Well, checkmate Austria and Prussia, because you can't return a man to the throne if he's already dead. Citizen Louis Capet was put on trial for treason. Obviously, he was found guilty, but his punishment was less certain. Many moderates wanted to simply deport him, but Robespierre insisted the revolution could only live if the king was dead. A vote was held, and by just one vote, Louis was sentenced to the guillotine. If you don't mind, I'd like to say a few words first. Gentlemen, I am innocent of everything of which I am accused. Wait, you're too loud. They can't hear me. Hang on, I haven't finished yet. Wait, dude! Uncool. In her prison cell, Marie Antoinette heard the guns fire, signaling her husband's death. Before long, she would meet the same fate. Back on the war front, France defied all expectations and actually...
I don't know what it means, man, sitting on a prison cell knowing the entire population is against you. and you are going to die definitely by guillotine. I don't know how that feels. That's just fucked up, man.
They managed to push the enemy back, but then more countries joined the coalition against France, and it all went to pot again. What do? Conscript the masses! The National Convention introduced a conscription law, with each regional department having to meet a certain quota of men for the army. However, not everyone was happy with this new law. You see, while Paris was definitely a hotbed for radical revolutionary fervor, some of the regions outside of Paris weren't quite so keen on the revolution. Some were largely still conservative, still supported the church, and just didn't suffer from that much inequality.
That's what I was thinking, man. Religion is pretty damn strong, especially when it comes to Catholic Church, right? It's pretty strong thing. In the name of church, people have done really fucked up thing. The people who are not really bad, but just because they think they're doing the God's bidding, they did really after thing in the past. So because of revolution happened, they just created some kind of a, weird, some different religion and just said no to the Catholic Church. People just went with that. That felt weird to me, like that level of agreement throughout the people. But obviously that can't be true.
Before the revolution. So as the revolution turned increasingly violent and anti-Christian, many were outraged. Now they were being conscripted to fight for the new republic they hated. That was the last straw. Counter-revolutionary uprisings erupted in a number of regions across France. Some would last for years, such as in the northwest, where a large-scale uprising was led by the Owls. Why were they called the Owls? Because their leader was named Jean Owl. Why was he called Jean Owl? Possibly because he could do a really good impression of an owl. Really? That's what we're going with? Owls? Just because this guy can do an impression of one? Hit him with it, Jean. Hoot, hoot.
Impeccable.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. The Chouannerie uprising lasted all the way until 1800. In the summer of 1793, the southern city of Toulon invited the British Navy over for some tea and crumpets. And then they asked if they'd possibly like to stay and occupy the city. Being an important naval base, this was a heavy blow to the Republic, who sent a relatively unknown young captain by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte to help stage the siege of the city. Toulon was recaptured by France in the winter, and for his service, Napoleon was promoted to the rank of Brigadier General. The most infamous counter-revolution.
Little did the British know that that little guy is going to be thorn in their side for a long, long time.
Revolution, however, occurred in the Vendée region. Throughout 1793, revolutionary forces clashed with the region's Catholic and Royal Army. The Republic defeated the counter-revolution through cruel pacification. In particular, General Jean-Baptiste Carrier committed brutal atrocities. In one instance, he had thousands of civilians, priests, women, and children tied to ships, which were then sunk. Carrier would later be found guilty of war.
What the fuck? Thousands, hundreds of thousands, women, children, tied them to the ship and sunk the ship. Just imagine standing there while all this happening. I mean, that's just, that's just stupid and effed up just thinking about it. I can't process that just standing there, right? I mean, that's just fucked up just witnessing that. Like, how... Damn, of course people would, basically go against this. People would get angry, like, how could you do this? Because this is way too fucked up, man.
Crimes and executed. Back in Paris, the government was still dominated by moderates. With the war going badly, revolts in the provinces, and the economy getting worse, it seemed the government just wasn't doing a very good job. Radicals' fear for the safety of the revolution intensified, and Marat even began calling for the moderates in the government to be executed. In return, the moderates called for the arrest of Marat. This led to a chain of events with the two sides in heated...
Now they're doing that shit. I'm surprised the king didn't do that at the first time when he was sparking this with all his letters. First of all, he's not doing this in some kind of a cafe in the background where nobody knows. He's writing public letters and people are reading it. So it's a public knowledge by now. I'm surprised how king, when he was alive, just didn't... This is the guy who's inciting everything. Just kill him. Basically send an assassin or something. I'm surprised he didn't do that.
Conflict. Robespierre declared the Jacobins to be an insurrection and called on the people to arm themselves. It all ended on the 31st of May 1793 with the National Convention surrounded by radical sans-culottes and 29 moderate Girondin politicians arrested. From this moment on, the moderates ceased to be a political force. Robespierre and his radicals would be in almost total control of the government. And this brings us to the story of a woman named Charlotte Corday. Charlotte lived in the northwest city of Caen, and like many in the area, was horrified at the rapid radicalization and increasing violence of the revolution. And the man she blamed more than anyone was Jean-Paul Marat.
Hey,
She wanted
kinda.
to bring peace back to France, and so she did something drastic. She traveled to Paris and told Marat she had a list of enemies for him to publish in his paper. Marat eagerly invited her in for a meeting. So where's that list of enemies you promised me? Here it is.
Just his name?
Wait a minute. This isn't a list of enemies. It just says, Yippee-ki-yay, mother... And just like that, Marat
That's
was
just after.
no more. Charlotte was quickly arrested and sent to the guillotine. Her dream of her...
He would have been awesome if he just had just one name of him, Marat. It's like, wait a minute, this is my name.
Restoring peace, however, died with her. Marat became a martyr. In temples of reason, symbols of the dead Marat became the new crucifix. In death, he became an even more powerful inspiration for the extreme levels of violence that were about to rip throughout the new republic. And that's right, here comes the Reign of Terror. If you thought this revolution already sounds pretty violent, well, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, now it's
The
coming.
radicals were now in control, and they believed not only was France surrounded by foreign enemies, but that within the masses, there were also plenty of internal ones too. Individuals not loyal to the revolution, conspiring to bring about its downfall. Robespierre and the rest of the radical faction were having none of it. A new committee of public
Yeah,
safety
this is the first proper Soviet Union, right? Wait a minute. Yeah, this is the first. This is the first proper Soviet Union here. This the Robespierre sounds like first Lenin, apparently.
was established with 12 members. Its purpose was to protect the new French Republic from its enemies, and it basically became a 12-man dictatorship with Robespierre as its leading voice. The Revolutionary Tribunal was also reinstated, a special court created to streamline the process of trying suspected enemies and handing out their death sentences. With these two new institutions, Robespierre wanted to scare France's enemies straight. In September 1793, it was announced that terror would be the order of the day. In other words,
Yeah, I mean, that's just fucked up around this, especially around the Soviet Union time. I remember reading stories of real stories where people just basically wrote down, and you can see the letter where it says, the instances where, there was basically a family who was in neighborhood, basically living there normally, knowing their neighbors, and, for years, their kids played with the neighbors' kids. They known them for years, and one day, suddenly they were not there when they woke up, and there was just, basically communist, whatever those police were called, were just walking around the house, and then they just went away, and the house was empty forever. That is just fucking grim when I see that story. That's a real story, and that's just grim when I hear that. I mean, this is kind of like that, right? Revolution happened. Now anybody who's against the revolution is the enemy. Anybody has any opposing idea is the enemy. This feels like Soviet Union.
fear had become official government policy. And from then onwards, we enter into the period known as the Reign of Terror. Spies and secret police were everywhere and watched the people closely. France's public had to be extremely careful what they said and how they behaved. Obviously, criticizing this new system, or the government, would quickly have you sent off to the guillotine. But that's not all. Even the most minor offense could have you tried before the Revolutionary Tribunal. Hello, Citizen Martin. Hello, Monsieur Dubois. Monsieur? Did I just hear you say Monsieur? That's the old style of address, my friend. To the guillotine! You know what? I didn't like him, but I do feel kinda bad for the king and his family. Oof, expressing sympathy for the royal family, are we? To the guillotine! 12 sous for a loaf of bread? That's way overpriced. To the guillotine! Man, this bread line is taking forever. To the guillotine! And you look like you're thinking anti-revolutionary thoughts. To the guillotine. Max, we're sending way too many people to the guillotine. To the guillotine! Chop, 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 chop. It was insane. All across France, about 40,000 people were killed for suspected crimes against liberty. Let's say your neighbor won't stop mowing the lawn at 7 in the morning. Well, then all you gotta do is tell the government they've been talking smack about the revolution. And there's a good chance they'll end up in front of the Revolutionary Tribunal. Maybe they'll even be executed, taking a metaphorical load off your shoulders and a literal one off theirs. The most prominent victim of the Reign of Terror was a certain Marie Antoinette, who was finally tried and found guilty of treason in
She did the hair inside the prison. Ah, man, commitment.
1793. She expected she'd be brought to the guillotine in a royal carriage. Fit for
Star
a queen.
Wars.
All the Republic could provide for her, however, was a wooden tumbril. At 37 years old, the most hated woman in French history met her end on the 16th of October, 1793. Robespierre had saved the revolution through terror, Internal dissent was being suppressed. The food situation was no longer quite as bad. Even the French military had got its act together again and pummeled the Allies at the Battle of Fleurus. For Danton and his followers, the time was right to try to normalize the French Republic. Hey Robespierre, so we were thinking that since things are finally going better, maybe we should rein in the terror. And while we're on it, we could possibly start taking it easier on the church, and also try to end this costly war. Crap. As time went on, Robespierre seemed to go, for lack of a better term, a bit mental. He was hell-bent on creating what he called a republic of virtue, and for him, this meant amping up the bloodshed even more. Throughout the spring and summer of 1794, executions reached an unprecedented level during a period known as the Great Terror. Even those closest to him found their way to the guillotine if they dared oppose.
I mean, look, this is the guy who basically started the revolution, and he has the power because people were behind him with the revolution. He's not a king or anything that he can just claim to be a power. If people are actually afraid that 40,000 people just died, because of guillotine, people can basically see the terror and just say, fuck Robespierre, just let's kill him first. I'm surprised how people didn't band together to take him out. It's just one guy in the end. I mean, I know he has party, but even his party hates him now.
His ideas and actions, and he began alienating himself from the rest of the convention.
There you go.
He created a new deistic religion called the Cult of the Supreme Being, along with the new annual Festival of the Supreme Being. Man, I think Robespierre is really starting to lose it. He thinks he's a god or something. Nonsense. Sure, he's gone a little extreme, but he doesn't think he's a god. My children, bathe your immortal souls in the virtue of my republic. Okay, yeah, he's completely lost it. Robespierre's ultimate mistake, however, came on July 26th, when he made a speech to the National Convention, in which he said this: I have in my hand a brand new list of enemies to be sent to the guillotine, and many of you are on this list, but I'm not going to tell you who yet. What do you think of that? I think we should send Robespierre to the guillotine first. All in favor? Oh, no. 2 days later, Robespierre became the final victim of the monstrous terror and paranoia he had created. Many historical accounts of the revolution end here with the death of Robespierre and his terror. But the revolution officially continued for another 5 years, until 1799. So what happened between now and then? Well, after the fall of Robespierre, a more moderate political group called the Thermidorians took control of the convention. They wanted to restore stability to the government. Now, Robespierre's allies and other radicals who had fueled the terror themselves became the target of political suppression. Bourgeois street fighters took on the radical sans-culottes in the streets during a period named the White Terror. In 1795, the Thermidorians drafted a new constitution and created a government called the Directory, with the purpose of preventing power from being able to fall into the hands of a single individual again. As this new government was being established, royalists who wanted to bring the monarchy back to France saw this moment as an opportunity to strike. They staged an insurrection in Paris and battled with the National Guard in the streets. Luckily, one Napoleon Bonaparte happened to be in Paris at the time, and he took control of the situation, firing on the crowd and putting down the insurrection. From this moment on, the people of Paris would never again be able to stage a popular uprising and lost their control over the revolution. For his actions, Napoleon became a general and was sent to take control of the French armies in Italy. The new Directory remained a fairly ineffective government for the remainder of the revolution. It was plagued with corruption and struggled to keep the economy afloat, and as a result, wasn't very popular. For the people of France, with the strict social customs of both royalist France and the terror gone, they didn't really know what to do with themselves.
Yeah, this is what usually happens, right? Overthrow a king who's basically living lavish life and wasting money, not caring about the peasants. Somebody like Robespierre comes into power, who becomes a dictator of sort and do things whatever he like. After that, if some kind of a government type of thing comes where one person doesn't have power, but it's a group of people, but those group of people do the same thing the king did and nobles did, who just, basically do corruption and live lavish life where everybody suffers. It's the same thing.
Men no longer removed their hats when talking to women. Different classes began intermingling, and a publication began circulating that looked a lot like a modern dating app. It was social anarchy. Outside of France, the war continued. In 1795, France took the Netherlands, where they set up a puppet state. Then they negotiated both Prussia and Spain out of the war. The British attempted to land French royalists in the west to reinforce rebellion, but that plan failed. In 1796, the French planned a three-pronged attack with the aim of marching on Vienna and knocking Austria out of the war. the two northern armies were defeated and forced to retreat. However, Napoleon in the south, with groundbreaking military
he was
strategy,
just badass.
won battle after battle after battle. He pushed the Austrians out of Italy and began...
This was more like a distraction party with Napoleon, right? The main party was on the north. This was more like a distraction party, which is the one who actually was winning things.
And closing in on Vienna. The Austrians freaked out, and Napoleon oversaw the signing of a peace treaty. He had single-handedly knocked Austria out of the war. And by the way, he was only 28. So maybe it's about time you moved out of your mom's basement. Napoleon became a famed hero among the French people, but his aspirations were still higher. He briefly went off to Egypt and discovered a bunch of gnarly Egyptian stuff, but then the British destroyed his fleet and trapped his forces. Say, Napoleon, sir, you're not going to leave us here stuck in Egypt and return to France, are you? Nonsense, my boy. I would never dream of abandoning my loyal soldiers. Wow, what's that over there? On his return to Paris, Napoleon found himself to be extremely popular, and the government extremely unpopular, and he started getting some power-hungry ideas. Conveniently, a politician named Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès approached Napoleon and said, "Hey man, since you're so popular, do you want to help me stage a coup?" "Great idea! Let's stage a coup, and then I'll coup you." What? Napoleon, with the help of his politician brother, entered the government chamber, possibly got punched in the face, and finally his troops intimidated the council to dissolve the government and create a new constitution that
the guy basically punched Napoleon and he just stared at him. You do realize who I am, right? Me and my army just defeated Austria. They basically, surrendered. You're gonna punch me? We have big guns.
Basically made Napoleon a dictator. So there you have it. The French Revolution, born with the great promise of liberty and equality. The common people dared challenge an oppressive system that had existed for centuries. But before they knew it, they found liberty sidelined by terror, equality that possibly didn't quite hit the mark, and an absolute monarchy replaced by an absolute dictator. Napoleon began stabilizing French society. He restored the Catholic Church and got rid of that crazy calendar, among other things. But he remained ever ambitious. He was France's first consul, but he slept soundly at night dreaming of being something even bigger. Napoleon's expansionist aspirations, combined with the ongoing conflict in Europe, would eventually lead the continent into a huge conflict known today as...
Yeah, French Revolution was so damn bloody because of Robespierre. Basically, he just went ballistic. But if you give one guy that much power, I blame his party, right? I get it. He was the one with the ideas, and they made him the leader. But that doesn't mean you just agree with everything he says and give him actual power. His party and basically the whatever government he created was the one who gave him that much power. They should have just intervened much long before that. Like, you're not the king, don't act like it or something. But that just went way out of the hand, basically. It just happened how Soviet Union happened, right? Robespierre just went ballistic, starting to see, how everybody's just the enemy and sending everyone to guillotine because that's just apparently. So it went from king and then nobility, just living lavish life and not caring about people, to a revolution where a dictator type of Robespierre appeared. And basically he just, screwed everything until he accuses his own party, and then he realized, wait a minute, I have power because my party said I have power. And then he died. His head got chopped off, and then all of his friends' head got chopped off. That was just fucked up. And by then, the whatever government came was also like your average corruption government, who was not caring about the economy, or just living lavish life themselves. So there you go, Napoleon. Alright people, that was the French Revolution. OverSimplified Part 2. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe, check out the Rick Sandy, there's a link in the description. Check out the calls for placing the link cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.